The stagecoach door swung open, and Lillian Zimmerman stepped onto the dusty street of Castle Dome, Arizona territory, carrying nothing but a worn carpet bag and the weight of a secret that could get her killed. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on the small mining town, and Lillian shielded her eyes as she surveyed her surroundings. Castle Dome was smaller than she had expected, a collection of weathered buildings clustered along a single main street with the purple mountains rising in the distance. It was 1882, and this remote corner of Arizona seemed like the perfect place to disappear. She had been running for 3 weeks now, ever since that night in San Francisco when she had witnessed something she should never have seen. A man leaned against the post outside the general store, his tall frame relaxed but his eyes sharp as they took in the new arrival. Yates Vaughn had lived in Castle Dome for 5 years, working as a ranch hand at the Double Creek Ranch just outside town. At 26, he had seen his share of drifters and newcomers, but something about this woman caught his attention. She held herself with a careful stillness, like a deer that had just caught the scent of a predator. Lillian felt his gaze and fought the urge to look away too quickly. She could not afford to appear suspicious or nervous, even though her heart was racing. The stagecoach driver was already unloading her trunk, and she needed to find somewhere to stay before nightfall. "You need directions, miss." Yates pushed off from the post and approached her, his boots kicking up small clouds of dust. He removed his hat as he drew near, revealing sandy brown hair that was slightly too long and blue eyes that seemed genuinely kind. "I am looking for respectable lodging," Lillian said, keeping her voice steady. She had practiced sounding like just another woman seeking a fresh start out west, not someone fleeing from dangerous men who would kill to keep their secrets safe. "Mrs. Patterson runs a boarding house 2 streets over," Yates said, gesturing east. "Clean rooms, good meals. You planning to stay in Castle Dome long?" "I have not yet decided," Lillian replied carefully. "I am considering my options." Yates nodded, accepting this vague answer without pressing. "I can help you with your trunk if you like. It is too heavy for you to manage alone." Lillian hesitated. She did not want to accept help from anyone, did not want to form connections that might put others at risk. But refusing would seem odd, and the last thing she needed was to stand out. "Thank you. That is very kind." As Yates lifted her trunk with easy strength, Lillian noticed the way he moved with confidence and purpose. He was lean and muscular from years of ranch work, his skin tanned from long days in the sun. There was something solid and trustworthy about him, though Lillian reminded herself not to trust anyone. Trust had nearly gotten her killed. They walked in silence through the dusty streets. A few people glanced their way, curious about the stranger in town, but no one seemed particularly interested. That was good. Lillian wanted to blend in, to become just another face in a small western town. Mrs. Patterson's boarding house was a 2-story building painted white, though the paint was peeling in places from the harsh desert sun. The elderly widow who owned it greeted them at the door with a warm smile. "A new guest. How wonderful," Mrs. Patterson said, ushering them inside. "Yates, you are always so helpful. Set that trunk right there, dear boy." After Yates had placed the trunk in the entrance hall, he turned to Lillian. "Welcome to Castle Dome, Miss Zimmerman, Lillian Zimmerman." She offered him a small smile, the first genuine expression that had crossed her face since arriving. "Yates Vaughn. If you need anything, I am usually at the Double Creek Ranch about 3 miles north of town. We all look out for each other here." After he left, Mrs. Patterson showed Lillian to a small but clean room on the 2nd floor. The window overlooked the main street, giving Lillian a clear view of anyone approaching. She paid for 2 weeks in advance with money from the small purse she kept hidden in her dress pocket, separate from the larger sum sewn into the lining of her carpet bag. That first night, Lillian barely slept. Every sound made her jump. Every creak of the old building set her heart racing. She kept seeing the face of Marcus Sterling, the corrupt police captain in San Francisco, as he accepted a thick envelope of money from the gang leader whose name she had learned was Thomas Greer. She had been delivering medicine to her employer, a prominent doctor, and had taken a wrong turn in the building that housed the police department. The door had been ajar, and she had frozen in the shadows of the hallway, watching the exchange of money, hearing their plans to eliminate witnesses to a murder they had helped cover up. They had not seen her. At least, she had thought they had not seen her. But the next morning, 2 men had come to the doctor's house asking questions about her, describing her too accurately to be coincidence. She had fled with only what she could carry, using money she had been saving for years, and had bought passage on the first train heading east. The days began to pass in Castle Dome with a quiet rhythm that Lillian found both comforting and unsettling. She took a job helping Mrs. Patterson with the boarding house, cooking and cleaning in exchange for reduced rent. It gave her something to do and a reason to be in town without drawing attention. Yates Vaughn appeared at the boarding house more frequently than seemed strictly necessary. He came by to fix a loose step on the porch, to deliver a side of beef from the ranch, to return a book he had borrowed from Mrs. Patterson. Each time, he found reasons to speak with Lillian, his manner friendly but never pushy. "You settling in all right?" he asked one afternoon as she hung laundry in the small yard behind the boarding house. "Well enough," Lillian said, pinning a sheet to the line. The desert wind immediately caught it, making it snap and billow. "You ever been out west before?" Yates leaned against the fence post, his hat pushed back on his head. "No, this is all very new to me." That much was true. San Francisco had been a city bustling and crowded. This vast emptiness, the endless sky and distant mountains, felt like another world entirely. "It takes some getting used to," Yates said, "but there is something about this land that gets into your blood. The space, the freedom. A person can be whoever they want to be out here." Lillian glanced at him sharply, wondering if there was a hidden meaning in his words. But his expression was open and sincere. "That is a comforting thought," she said carefully. "You seem like someone who might need a fresh start," Yates said. "Most folks who come to Castle Dome are running from something or looking for something, sometimes both." "And you?" Lillian asked, surprising herself. She had meant to keep all conversation superficial, but something about Yates made her curious. "Bit of both, I suppose. Left home when I was 19. My father and I did not see eye to eye on much. Worked my way west doing whatever jobs I could find. Ended up here and found I liked it well enough to stay." Lillian pinned another sheet to the line. "Do you ever regret leaving?" "Sometimes I regret the way I left," Yates said thoughtfully, "but not the leaving itself. Sometimes a person has to choose between being true to themselves and making others happy. Those 2 things do not always line up." Over the following weeks, Lillian found herself looking forward to Yates's visits. He had a quiet steadiness about him that put her at ease, even though she remained vigilant about revealing anything about her past. He told her stories about working on the ranch, about the characters who lived in Castle Dome, about the hard beauty of the desert. "You should come out to the ranch sometime," he said one evening as they sat on Mrs. Patterson's porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. "See what life is really like out here." "I do not ride," Lillian said. "I could teach you. Or you could ride in the wagon. We have a new crop of foals, prettiest things you ever saw." Lillian wanted to say yes more than she cared to admit, but getting close to anyone was dangerous. "Perhaps," she said noncommittally, but Yates was patient. He continued to stop by, continued to talk to her, continued to show up in small, consistent ways that gradually wore down her defenses. When Mrs. Patterson mentioned that her sister was sick and she needed to travel to Tucson for a week, Yates volunteered to check in on Lillian daily to make sure she had everything she needed while managing the boarding house alone. "That is not necessary," Lillian protested. "Maybe not," Yates agreed. "But I will do it anyway." True to his word, he appeared each evening after finishing his work at the ranch. He helped her carry water from the well, fixed a door that was sticking, and one night brought fresh bread from the ranch cook. They fell into an easy routine, sitting on the porch in the cooling evening air, talking about nothing and everything. "Why did you really come to Castle Dome?" Yates asked one night. They had been discussing the various mining operations in the area, but the question came out of nowhere. Lillian's heart skipped a beat. "I told you I wanted a fresh start." "I know that is what you told me," Yates said gently. "But I have been watching you, Lillian. You are always looking over your shoulder. You flinch when strangers come to town. You are running from something, and it is something that has you scared." For a long moment, Lillian said nothing. The truth pushed at her throat, wanting to spill out. She was so tired of carrying this secret alone, of constantly being afraid. "If I tell you something, can you keep it to yourself?" "Always," Yates said simply. And somehow Lillian believed him. So she told him everything. The words came tumbling out in a rush, from witnessing the bribe to fleeing San Francisco to the constant fear that Marcus Sterling's men would find her. Yates listened without interrupting, his expression growing more serious as the story unfolded. "These are dangerous men," he said when she finished. "If they have been looking for you, they might not stop." "I know," Lillian whispered, "but I did not know what else to do." "If I had gone to the authorities, Sterling would have known. He has connections throughout the police department. I would have been dead before I could testify to anyone who mattered." Yates was quiet for a moment, thinking. "You did the right thing by running, but you cannot run forever." "I know that too." Lillian felt tears prick at her eyes. "I just need enough time for them to forget about me, to decide I am not worth pursuing." "Men like that do not forget loose ends," Yates said, "but they do not need to find you. You are safe here, Lillian. I will make sure of it." "You cannot promise that." "Yes, I can." The conviction in his voice made her look at him. In the fading light, his face was serious, determined. "I meant what I said before. We look out for each other in Castle Dome, and I look out for people I care about. You barely know me. I know enough." Yates reached out and took her hand, his touch warm and solid. "I know you are brave and resourceful. I know you would rather risk your own life than let guilty men go unpunished. I know you make the best biscuits I have ever tasted, and that you hum when you think no one is listening. I know that when you smile, which is not often enough, it lights up your whole face." Lillian stared at him, her heart pounding for an entirely different reason now. "Yates, I am not asking you for anything," he said. "I just want you to know that you are not alone anymore. Whatever comes, we will face it together." Something shifted in Lillian's chest, like a locked door swinging open. For the first time in weeks, she felt like she could breathe fully. "Thank you," she whispered. Yates squeezed her hand gently. "No thanks needed." That night marked a turning point. Lillian stopped trying to keep Yates at a distance. She accepted his invitation to visit the Double Creek Ranch and found herself enchanted by the sprawling property with its herds of cattle and horses. The ranch foreman, a gruff man named Samuel who had known Yates for years, welcomed her warmly. "About time Yates found himself a good woman," Samuel said, loud enough for Yates to hear. "Sam, quit your matchmaking," Yates called out, but he was grinning. Lillian found herself grinning too. The ranch felt like a world apart from her fears and worries. She watched Yates work with the horses, his movements confident and gentle as he trained a young mare. He had a natural way with animals, patient and calm. "Want to try?" he asked, gesturing for her to approach. "I do not know how. I will teach you." Yates guided her hand to the mare's neck, showing her how to stroke the soft coat. The horse nickered softly, leaning into the touch. "See, she likes you." Standing there in the warm sunshine with Yates beside her and the horse breathing softly under her hand, Lillian felt something she had not experienced in a long time. Happiness. Simple, uncomplicated happiness. Over the next few weeks, Lillian and Yates spent more and more time together. He taught her to ride, first on an old gentle gelding and then on more spirited horses. She proved to be a natural rider, and he loved watching her gain confidence in the saddle. They rode out into the desert together, exploring the rugged landscape with its strange cacti and sweeping vistas. "It is beautiful here," Lillian said one afternoon as they sat on a rocky outcrop looking out over the valley. "Harsh but beautiful. Like you," Yates said. Lillian turned to him, raising an eyebrow. "Are you calling me harsh?" "I am calling you a survivor," Yates said. "Someone who has been through hard things but has not let it break her spirit." Lillian looked away, feeling unexpectedly emotional. "There were times I wanted to break, times I thought about just giving up. But you did not." "No, I did not." She took a deep breath of the clean desert air. "Being here with you has made me remember what it feels like to have hope." Yates moved closer, close enough that their shoulders touched. "I am falling in love with you, Lillian. I know it is probably too soon to say that, and I know you have a lot you are dealing with. But I believe in being honest about how I feel." Lillian's breath caught. She turned to face him, seeing nothing but sincerity in his blue eyes. "I am falling in love with you too," she admitted. "It terrifies me." "Why?" "Because caring about people makes you vulnerable. Because if Sterling's men find me, they might hurt you to get to me. Because I do not know if I can have a normal life, a happy life, with this shadow hanging over me." Yates cupped her face gently in his hands. "Life is always uncertain, Lillian. There are no guarantees. But I would rather have whatever time we can have together than spend my life playing it safe and alone." "Wouldn't you?" In answer, Lillian leaned forward and kissed him. It was her first kiss, and it was everything she had imagined and more. Yates kissed her back tenderly, his arms coming around her to hold her close. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were breathing hard. "Yes," Lillian whispered. "Yes, I would rather have this." Their relationship deepened after that day. Yates made no secret of his feelings, and Lillian found herself opening up in ways she had never thought possible. She told him about her childhood as an orphan in Chicago, about working her way up from scullery maid to assistant to one of San Francisco's most respected doctors. She told him about her dreams of maybe someday becoming a nurse, if such a thing was possible for a woman with her background. "Why could it not be possible?" Yates asked. "You are smart and capable. You have a way of making people feel safe." "It takes money and connections," Lillian said. "Neither of which I have." "You have me," Yates said. "And I have some money saved, not a fortune, but enough. If you wanted to pursue training as a nurse, I would support you." Lillian stared at him. "You would do that. I told you, I love you. Your dreams are important to me." It was moments like these that made Lillian realize just how deeply she had fallen for this cowboy with his quiet strength and generous heart. She found herself imagining a future with him, something she had not dared to do before. A little house, maybe on the ranch. Children someday. A life built on honesty and love. But the past had a way of catching up with people, no matter how far they ran. It was a hot Tuesday in late August when the two strangers rode into Castle Dome. Lillian was at the general store buying supplies when she saw them through the window. Her blood turned to ice. She recognized the taller one, a man named Joseph Carter who worked as an enforcer for Thomas Greer. She had seen him once before in San Francisco, outside the gambling house where Greer conducted his business. Lillian forced herself to stay calm. She finished her transaction, gathered her parcels, and walked back to the boarding house at a normal pace, even though every instinct screamed at her to run. Once inside, she went straight to her room and packed her carpetbag with shaking hands. She had to leave. Now. Before they found her. Before they hurt anyone in Castle Dome trying to get information about her. But even as she stuffed her few possessions into the bag, she knew she could not just disappear. Not without telling Yates. Not without saying goodbye. She was still debating what to do when she heard heavy footsteps on the stairs. Mrs. Patterson had gone to visit a friend, so Lillian was alone in the house. Her heart hammering, she looked around for a weapon. Her hand closed on the heavy candlestick on her bedside table just as her door burst open. Joseph Carter filled the doorway, his cold eyes locking on her. "Lillian Zimmerman, Captain Sterling has been looking for you." "I do not know what you are talking about," Lillian said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Do not play dumb. You saw something you should not have seen. You have been causing the captain a lot of worry." Carter stepped into the room and Lillian backed away until she hit the window. "He sent me to make sure you cannot testify about what you saw. He also wants me to find out who you might have told." "I have not told anyone anything," Lillian lied. "I just wanted to get away from the city. That is all." "You expect me to believe you ran all the way to this dusty hellhole for no reason?" Carter laughed, an ugly sound. "You are coming with me. The captain wants to talk to you personally." "I am not going anywhere with you." Carter's hand moved to the gun at his hip. "That was not a request." Lillian gripped the candlestick tighter, her mind racing. She could not overpower this man. Her only chance was to scream for help and hope someone heard before he killed her. But the boarding house was at the edge of town, and there was no one nearby. "Move," Carter ordered, pulling out his gun. Lillian was preparing to throw the candlestick at him when a voice came from the doorway. "I would not do that if I were you." Carter spun around to find Yates standing there, his own gun drawn and pointed steadily at the enforcer's chest. Relief flooded through Lillian even as fear for Yates's safety made her stomach clench. "This does not concern you, Cowboy," Carter said. "The lady concerns me, so yes, it does." Yates's voice was calm but hard as steel. "Put the gun down." "You do not know who you are dealing with," Carter said. "Captain Marcus Sterling runs San Francisco. He has connections everywhere. You do not want to make an enemy of him. And you do not want to find out what happens to men who threaten women in my town," Yates replied. "Last chance. Put the gun down." For a tense moment, no one moved. Then Carter made his decision. He swung his gun toward Yates and Yates fired. The shot was deafening in the small room. Carter's gun clattered to the floor as he clutched his shoulder, blood seeping between his fingers. "You shot me," Carter gasped, more surprised than hurt. "Could have killed you, did not, but I will if you make another move." Yates kicked Carter's gun away. "Lillian, go get the sheriff." Lillian did not need to be told twice. She ran down the stairs and out into the street, her legs shaking so badly she could barely stay upright. The sheriff's office was 3 buildings down, and she burst through the door without knocking. Sheriff William Thorne was a weathered man in his 50s who had seen just about everything in his years, keeping the peace in various frontier towns. He listened to Lillian's breathless explanation, then grabbed his own gun and followed her back to the boarding house. By the time they returned, Yates had tied Carter's hands with a length of rope and was standing guard over him. The wounded man sat on the floor, still clutching his bleeding shoulder and glaring murderously at Yates. "This man came to kill Miss Zimmerman," Yates told the sheriff. "He admitted he was sent by someone in San Francisco." Sheriff Thorne took in the scene with a practiced eye. That true? He asked Carter. Carter said nothing, just continued to glare. We will get the doctor to look at that shoulder, then you are going in a cell while I wire San Francisco and find out what this is all about, the sheriff said. Yates, you did good. After Carter was led away, Yates turned to Lillian. She was shaking, the adrenaline wearing off and leaving her weak. Without a word, he pulled her into his arms and held her tight. You are safe, he murmured into her hair. I've got you, you are safe. Lillian clung to him, finally allowing herself to feel the terror she had been holding back. He was going to kill me, or take me back to Sterling, which amounts to the same thing. I know, but he did not, and he will not get another chance. There might be others. The man who was with him, I saw 2 men ride into town. Yates pulled back to look at her. Stay close to me. Do not go anywhere alone until we know it is safe. Over the next few days, the full story came out. The second man Carter had been traveling with had left town as soon as he heard about the shooting. Sheriff Thorne telegraphed the United States Marshal's office in San Francisco with information about what Lillian had witnessed. It turned out that federal marshals had been building a case against Marcus Sterling and Thomas Greer for months, but they lacked solid evidence of the corruption. Lillian's testimony could be the key they needed. A federal marshal named Robert Dixon arrived in Castle Dome 2 weeks later. He was a serious man with kind eyes who listened carefully as Lillian recounted everything she had seen and heard that night in San Francisco. With your testimony, we can get arrest warrants for both Sterling and Greer, Marshal Dixon said. But you would need to come back to San Francisco to testify before a grand jury. Is that safe? Yates asked. He had insisted on being present during the interview. We would provide protection, the marshal assured them. And once Sterling and Greer are arrested, Miss Zimmerman will no longer be in danger. They will be the ones locked up. Lillian looked at Yates, her heart heavy. I have to do this. Those men have hurt people, killed people. If I can help stop them, I have to try. Then we go together, Yates said firmly. You do not have to do that. Your life is here. My life is where you are. Yates took her hand. I am not letting you face this alone. Marshal Dixon smiled slightly. You are a lucky woman, Miss Zimmerman. Not many men would stand by someone in your situation. I know, Lillian said softly, squeezing Yates's hand. I am very lucky. The journey to San Francisco took over a week by train. Yates had never been on a train before, and under different circumstances, Lillian would have enjoyed showing him the changing landscape as they traveled west. But the closer they got to San Francisco, the more anxious she became. What if something goes wrong? She asked Yates one evening as they sat in their train compartment. What if Sterling finds out I am coming and arranges to have me killed before I can testify? Marshal Dixon has men watching Sterling around the clock, Yates reminded her. And I am watching you. Nothing is going to happen. You cannot watch me every second. Want to bet? Yates smiled, trying to lighten her mood. I have gotten pretty good at keeping an eye on you. I know you twist your hair when you are nervous, and you hum old hymns when you are content, and you get this little crease between your eyebrows when you are thinking hard about something. Despite her fear, Lillian found herself smiling. You notice all that. I notice everything about you. How could I not? You are the most important thing in my world. Lillian leaned against him, drawing comfort from his solid presence. When this is over, what do you want to do? Go back to Castle Dome, build a life with you. Yates paused. That is, if you will marry me. Lillian sat up, her eyes wide. Are you proposing? Not properly. I do not even have a ring yet. Yates cupped her face gently. But yes, I am asking. When this is all over and you are safe, will you marry me, Lillian Zimmerman? Tears spilled down Lillian's cheeks, but they were happy tears. Yes. Yes, I will marry you. Yates kissed her then, deep and sweet, and for a moment the world beyond their small compartment ceased to exist. There was only this, the two of them and the promise of a future together. San Francisco was just as Lillian remembered it, a bustling city of steep hills and crowded streets. But instead of fear, being back made her feel strong. She was not running anymore. She was standing and fighting. The grand jury hearing took place in a secure courthouse, with marshals stationed at every entrance. Lillian testified for 3 hours, describing exactly what she had seen and heard. She did not waver, did not hesitate, even when the defense attorney tried to discredit her testimony. Miss Zimmerman, is it not true that you are a woman of questionable character who has been living unwed with a man in Arizona territory? The attorney asked. That is absolutely not true, Lillian said firmly. I have been living in a respectable boarding house. Mr. Vaughn has been my friend and protector. Nothing inappropriate has occurred between us. But you plan to marry this man. I do. He is the finest man I have ever known, and I am proud to have him in my life. Yates, watching from the gallery, felt his heart swell with pride. Lillian was magnificent, refusing to be intimidated or shamed. Based on her testimony and the additional evidence the marshals had gathered, the grand jury issued indictments for Marcus Sterling and Thomas Greer. Both men were arrested immediately. Joseph Carter, still recovering from his gunshot wound, turned state's evidence in exchange for a lighter sentence, providing even more damning information about the corruption network. You did it, Marshal Dixon told Lillian after it was all over. Sterling and Greer will go to prison for a very long time. You are safe now, Miss Zimmerman, truly safe. The relief was overwhelming. Lillian had carried the weight of fear for so long that she had almost forgotten what it felt like to be free of it. She walked out of the courthouse into the San Francisco sunshine with Yates at her side, and for the first time in months, she felt like she could truly breathe. What do you want to do now? Yates asked. Go home, Lillian said. Back to Castle Dome, back to our life. They stopped in a jewelry store on the way back to their hotel. Yates insisted on buying Lillian a proper engagement ring, a simple gold band with a small diamond that caught the light beautifully. It is perfect, Lillian said as he slipped it onto her finger. You are perfect, Yates replied, kissing her hand. The journey back to Castle Dome felt entirely different from the anxious trip west. Lillian and Yates spent the long hours on the train planning their future. They would marry as soon as they returned. Yates had already spoken to Samuel about building a small house on the ranch property, and Lillian wanted to look into training as a midwife and nurse, serving the women of Castle Dome and the surrounding ranches. We can have a good life, Yates said. A simple life, but a good one. Simple sounds wonderful, Lillian said. I've had enough excitement to last me a lifetime. When they finally arrived back in Castle Dome, the whole town turned out to welcome them home. Mrs. Patterson wept with joy and immediately began planning the wedding. Sheriff Thorne shook Yates's hand and told Lillian he was proud of her courage. Even crusty old Samuel got a little misty-eyed when Yates announced their engagement. Knew it the moment I saw her, Samuel said. Knew she was the one for you. They were married 3 weeks later in the small church at the center of town. Lillian wore a simple white dress that Mrs. Patterson had helped her sew, and she carried wildflowers that Yates had picked himself from the desert. The whole town attended, cramming into the small church to witness the union. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife and Yates kissed her, Lillian felt a joy so pure and complete that she thought her heart might burst from it. This man had saved her life in more ways than one. He had kept her secrets, protected her from danger, and loved her with a constancy she had never experienced before. The reception was held at the ranch, with tables set up in the yard and food enough to feed an army. There was music and dancing, and Lillian laughed more in those few hours than she had in the entire previous year. "Happy?" Yates asked as they danced together under the stars. "Happier than I ever thought possible," Lillian replied honestly. The small house Yates had built was ready for them by the end of September. It was not large, just 3 rooms, but it had glass windows and a solid roof and a porch that looked out toward the mountains. Lillian made it into a home with curtains she sewed herself and furniture they bought or built together. Life fell into a comfortable rhythm. Yates worked at the ranch during the day while Lillian established herself as the person to call when a woman in the area was having a baby or needed medical help. She studied every book on medicine and nursing she could get her hands on, teaching herself and learning from experience. The first baby she helped deliver was born on a cold night in January. The mother was a young ranch wife having her first child, and the labor was long and difficult. But Lillian stayed calm, remembering everything she had learned from the doctor in San Francisco and from her own studies. When the baby finally came, a healthy boy with strong lungs, the mother wept with relief and gratitude. "Thank you," she kept saying. "Thank you." Driving home in the wagon as the sun rose over the desert, Lillian felt a deep sense of purpose. This was her calling, helping bring new life into the world and caring for women in their most vulnerable moments. Yates was waiting for her when she got home, having been too anxious to sleep. "How did it go?" "It went well. Mother and baby are both healthy." Lillian leaned into his embrace, exhausted but happy. "I am so proud of you," Yates murmured into her hair. Their own first child came in the spring of 1884, a boy they named James after Yates's grandfather. Lillian had been terrified during her pregnancy, knowing too well all the things that could go wrong. But the birth was mercifully quick, and James came into the world wailing lustily. Yates held his son with shaking hands, tears streaming down his face. "He is perfect. You are amazing. I love you both so much." Watching her husband cradle their baby, Lillian felt a sense of completion she had never known was missing. This was her family. These 2 people were her whole world. James was followed 2 years later by a daughter they named Ruth, and then another son, Thomas, 2 years after that. The little house grew crowded with children and toys and laughter. Yates built an addition to give them more space, and Lillian learned to balance motherhood with her work as a midwife. "How do you do it all, Mrs. Patterson?" asked one afternoon as she visited and watched Lillian simultaneously nurse Thomas, help Ruth with her alphabet, and give instructions to James about feeding the chickens. "I have a good partner," Lillian said, smiling at Yates, who had just come in from the barn. "We work together." And they did. Yates was a hands-on father who was not afraid to change diapers or comfort a crying baby. He cooked dinner when Lillian was out delivering a baby, and he played with the children in the evenings while she caught up on rest. "This is what partnership looks like," he told Samuel once when the foreman commented on how much Yates helped around the house. "Lillian and I are a team, always have been, always will be." The years passed, busy and full. The children grew, each developing their own personalities. James was serious and thoughtful, always asking questions about how things worked. Ruth was bold and adventurous, following her father around the ranch and begging to learn how to rope cattle. Thomas was gentle and quiet, preferring books and drawing to roughhousing. Lillian continued her work as a midwife, becoming so respected in the region that women sometimes traveled for hours to have her attend their births. She also took on apprentices, teaching other women the skills they needed to provide medical care in their own communities. Yates advanced at the ranch, eventually becoming foreman when Samuel retired. He was respected by the ranch hands for his fairness and his skill with horses. The owner of the Double Creek Ranch, an elderly man named Harrison, had no children and began talking about leaving the ranch to Yates when he passed. "You have made this place thrive," Harrison told Yates. "It should go to someone who loves it as much as I do." When Harrison died in 1892, his will indeed left the ranch to Yates. Suddenly, Lillian and Yates found themselves landowners, responsible for hundreds of acres and dozens of employees. "Can we do this?" Lillian asked the night they learned about the inheritance. "We can do anything together," Yates said. "We have proven that over and over." They proved it again, building the Double Creek Ranch into one of the most successful operations in Arizona territory. Yates managed the cattle and horses while Lillian handled the finances and business dealings. Their children helped as they grew older, learning the business from the ground up. Time brought changes. Arizona became a state in 1912, and Castle Dome evolved from a rough mining town into an established community with a school, a hospital, and even a library. Lillian was instrumental in getting the hospital built, raising funds and donating generously from their own resources. Their children married and had children of their own. James became a doctor, inspired by his mother's work. Ruth married a rancher and moved to Colorado but visited often. Thomas became a teacher, opening a school for children in the remote areas around Castle Dome. On their 30th wedding anniversary, Yates took Lillian back to the rocky outcrop where he had first told her he loved her. They sat together, older now but still as much in love as they had been as young people. "You ever regret it?" Lillian asked. "Taking on a woman with such a complicated past?" "Never, not once." Yates pulled her close. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me, you and our family." "I was so scared when I first came to Castle Dome," Lillian said. "I thought I would never be safe, never be happy. But you were brave. You took a chance on trusting me. You made it easy to trust you. You have never broken a promise to me, and I never will." Yates kissed her temple. "I promise to keep your secrets and keep you safe forever. That is one promise I will keep until my last breath." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sunset paint the desert in gold and crimson. In the distance, they could see the ranch, their home, the life they had built together from nothing but love and trust and determination. Lillian thought back to that frightened young woman who had stepped off the stagecoach 30 years ago, carrying nothing but a bag and a terrible secret. She could hardly recognize herself in that woman now. Life had given her so much more than she had ever dared to dream. She had found safety, yes, but more than that, she had found purpose. She had found family. She had found a partner who stood by her through everything, who never wavered in his love and support. "Thank you," she said softly. "For what?" "For seeing me when I was trying so hard to be invisible, for caring enough to notice I was scared, for being brave enough to love me anyway." "Loving you was never brave," Yates said. "It was inevitable. From the moment you stepped off that stagecoach, I was drawn to you. I just had to wait for you to be ready to trust me." "Well, you waited patiently." Yates laughed. "I do not know about patient. I would have waited forever if that was what you needed." As the last light faded from the sky, they made their way back down to where their horses waited. Lillian rode confidently now, as comfortable on horseback as she was delivering a baby or managing the ranch books. They rode home together through the gathering darkness, guided by the familiar path and the light spilling from the windows of their house. Their grandchildren were visiting, and the house was full of noise and activity when they arrived. Little voices called out greetings, and soon Lillian was surrounded by small bodies wanting hugs and attention. "Grandma, tell us the story," begged their oldest granddaughter, a serious girl of 8 named Violet. "Which story?" Lillian asked, though she knew which one the children always wanted to hear. "About how you and Grandpa met. About the bad men and how Grandpa saved you." Yates caught Lillian's eye and smiled. Over the years, they had developed a version of the story suitable for children, focusing on the romance and adventure while leaving out the most frightening details. "Well," Lillian began, settling into her rocking chair with Violet on her lap and the other grandchildren gathered around. "It was a very hot day in August when I first came to Castle Dome. I was scared and alone, and I did not think I would ever feel safe again. But then I met your grandfather, and everything changed." She told the story the way she always did, with Yates occasionally chiming in with his perspective. The children listened with rapt attention, even though they had heard it many times before. When she got to the part where Yates shot the bad man to protect her, all the children gasped right on cue. "And then," prompted Violet, even though she knew exactly what came next. "And then we fell in love," Lillian said, smiling at Yates. "And we got married and built this ranch and had your parents and lived happily ever after. Just like in the fairy tales," Violet said with satisfaction. "Better than any fairy tale," Yates said, "because it is real." Later that night, after the grandchildren had been put to bed and the house had finally grown quiet, Lillian and Yates sat together on their porch. It had become their habit over the years, these quiet moments at the end of the day when they could simply be together. "Do you think they understand how lucky we are?" Lillian asked. "The children and grandchildren. Maybe not yet, but they will someday when they are older and understand how rare it is to find what we have." Lillian nodded, resting her head on Yates's shoulder. "I sometimes wonder what would have happened if I had chosen a different town, if the stagecoach had taken me somewhere else. Then I would have spent my whole life looking for you," Yates said simply. "Because you are my person, Lillian, the only one for me. Fate or chance or whatever you want to call it, we were meant to find each other." "I believe that too." They sat in companionable silence, listening to the night sounds of the desert. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled. Closer by, the horses moved restlessly in the corral. These were the sounds of home, as familiar and comforting as breathing. The years continued to pass. They celebrated 40 years of marriage, then 45. Their children gave them more grandchildren, and those grandchildren grew and eventually had children of their own. The ranch continued to prosper under their stewardship, and Lillian trained dozens of women in midwifery and nursing, creating a network of healthcare providers throughout the region. When they were both in their 70s, they finally retired from active management of the ranch, turning it over to James and his wife. But they remained in the little house that Yates had built so many years ago, the house that had grown and changed with their family, but remained fundamentally the same at its core. "I do not want to live anywhere else," Lillian said when James suggested they might want to move into town where things would be easier. "This is our home," Yates agreed. "This is where we stay." On a warm spring morning in 1920, Lillian woke early and went out to the porch. She was 78 years old now. Her dark hair had gone silver, and her hands were no longer as steady as they once were. But her mind was still sharp, and her heart was still full of love for the life she had lived. Yates joined her a few minutes later, moving a bit slower than he used to but still strong and capable at 81. He handed her a cup of coffee and settled into the chair beside hers. "Beautiful morning," he observed. "They all are," Lillian said. "Every morning I wake up here with you is beautiful." They sat together and watched the sunrise as they had done thousands of times before. The desert bloomed with spring flowers, painting the landscape in unexpected colors. In the distance, they could see some of their great-grandchildren playing in the yard of James's house, their laughter carrying on the morning breeze. "I have been thinking," Yates said, "about what a strange and wonderful journey life has been." "Strange and wonderful," Lillian agreed. "If someone had told that frightened girl on the stagecoach that she would end up here with all this, she never would have believed it. But you took the chance. You trusted me with your secrets, and you kept them. You kept me safe, just like you promised." Lillian reached over and took his hand, their fingers intertwining naturally. "You have kept every promise you ever made to me. That was easy. Loving you, protecting you, building a life with you, those have been the easiest things I ever did." Lillian leaned over and kissed him, a gentle kiss that still held all the passion and devotion of their younger years. "I love you, Yates Vaughn. I have loved you for almost 40 years, and I will love you for whatever time we have left. And I love you, Lillian Vaughn. My brave, beautiful wife who arrived with secrets and stayed to build a legacy." They remained on the porch until the sun was high in the sky, talking about their life, their children and grandchildren, the ranch, the community they had helped build. They talked about the past without regret and the future with hope, knowing that whatever came, they would face it together, just as they always had. Their legacy lived on in the hospital that bore Lillian's name, in the ranch that employed dozens of families, in the school that Thomas had founded, in the medical practice that James ran. But most of all, their legacy lived on in the love they had shared, a love that had started with trust and grown into something that would outlast their mortal lives. As the afternoon sun began its descent toward the western mountains, their great-grandchildren came running up to the porch, full of energy and questions and requests for stories. Lillian and Yates welcomed them with open arms, ready to share the wisdom and love they had accumulated over a lifetime. "Tell us about the old days," the children begged. So they did, weaving tales of a wilder time, of the Arizona Territory before it became a state, of the challenges and adventures they had faced together. The children listened with wide eyes, barely able to imagine a world so different from their own. "Were you scared, great-grandma?" asked one little boy. "Sometimes," Lillian admitted. "But your great-grandfather taught me that being scared is okay, as long as you do not let fear stop you from living your life. And great-grandma taught me," Yates added, "that the strongest people are the ones who ask for help when they need it, who trust others with their vulnerabilities." The children nodded solemnly, storing away these nuggets of wisdom for when they were older and could fully appreciate them. As evening fell, and the children were called home to their own suppers, Lillian and Yates were left alone once more. The desert twilight painted everything in shades of purple and gold, and the first stars began to appear in the darkening sky. "Another good day," Yates said. "Another perfect day," Lillian corrected. They went inside together, to the home they had made, to the bed they had shared for decades, to the life they had built from a chance meeting and a desperate need for trust. As they settled in for the night, Lillian reflected on all the years that had passed since that hot August day when she had arrived in Castle Dome with nothing but secrets and fear. She had found so much more than safety in this place. She had found purpose, community, family, and a love that had sustained her through everything life had thrown at them. The secrets she had carried had long since lost their power to harm her. Marcus Sterling and Thomas Greer had died in prison, their corruption exposed and their influence destroyed. Joseph Carter had eventually been released, but had never bothered Lillian again. All of that was ancient history now, barely remembered except as the catalyst that had brought her to this place, to this man, to this life. "Thank you," she whispered into the darkness, not sure if she was thanking God or fate or simply the universe itself for bringing her to Castle Dome, to Yates, to this beautiful life she had been blessed to live. Beside her, Yates's breathing had already evened out into sleep. Lillian snuggled closer to him, drawing comfort from his warmth and his steady presence. Tomorrow would bring new joys and new challenges, more grandchildren to spoil, more stories to tell, more sunrises to watch from their beloved porch. But for now, in this moment, everything was perfect. She had everything she had ever needed or wanted. She had love, she had family, she had a home. She had a partner who had proven, day after day for almost 40 years, that he would keep her secrets and her heart safe forever. And that, Lillian thought as she drifted off to sleep, was the greatest treasure anyone could ask for.